everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Belgian Football Podcast. My name is Ben Jackson. I'll be your host as always. This week we are back to the three-man game. Joris is back, and so is Scott, of course. Joris and Scott, how you guys doing this evening?
Hi guys, hello everybody. I must say I was unfortunate enough to watch a fair bit of dross this past weekend from two teams in particular, which we'll get to. But on the plus side, we did see 38 goals, if you include Charleroi goal, which now is going to count for nothing, as we all know. But never mind all that. How's your holiday, Joris?
Oh, it was really great. I'm fully recharged now, back for the second half of the season. Oh, wait, I'm a bit early for that. Well, at least I'm back here now.
Yeah. As you kind of alluded to there, this is our last one before the World Cup. We're not really planning on recording during the World Cup. Like, logistically, it's just a nightmare to do that sort of stuff. But we'll obviously be talking about it on all our socials and stuff like that. And then depending on how it goes, maybe we can speak about it after the fact. But yeah, the Pro League will then be back. I think it's the 23rd of December, so just before Christmas, which is nice. But anyway, let's get on with this one and get into the results. As Scott said, plenty of goals. Just look at the first three games on the list here. Leuven against Selang on Friday night. Yeah, Selang were pretty pony in this one, finished 5-0 to Leuven. Westerlo then went and absolutely demolished Oostend. They won that one 6-0. Zulte Waregem against Eupen. I watched this one while Scott was watching the other one at the same time. This one finished 5-5. Absolutely mental game. St. Truden and Cercle Bruges, that one finished 1-0 to Circle. Charleroi Mechelen suspended. At time for suspension, that was 1-0 to the host Charleroi. Club Bruges threw away a 2-0 lead at home to Antwerp. That one finished 2 apiece. Standard and Union, they shared 5 goals as Union won 3-2 away from home. Ghent kept rolling. They beat Anderlecht away from home 2-0 despite being down to 10 men. And then Ghent saw off Adnan Kustovic and Kortrijk. They won that one 4-0. Both sides going down to 10 men in that one. Let's start in Leuven, and they faced Selang, and it just wasn't a contest at all. Just looking at the stats for Leuven, finished with 25 shots, 14 on target, 70% possession, passing accuracy of 88% as well. They were just super efficient, kept the ball, double the amount of passes Selang could manage. Selang 30% possession, 4 shots, only 1 on target. Summed them up really. Did take a while for Leuven to score, bearing in mind that the final was up 5-0, but Matthew Mertens getting back on the score sheet. It's been a while since he kind of scored despite his hot start to the season. He makes it 1-0 in the 23rd minute thanks to an assist from Casper De Noor. Sambu Sissoko then gets booked for pulling down a Leuven player in the box. It was so stupid. It was so pointless. Really stupid way to get booked. Give away a penalty as well. Mario Gonzalez makes absolutely no mistake from the spot. And I think literally 5 or 6 minutes later, Sissoko fouls Leuven on the break. Wasn't much contact, I don't think, but it's one of those ones, if you give the foul and kind of how the foul was, you're going to get your second yellow card. So he gets sent off in the 35th minute. And I mean, Selang after that point had been poor. That was it, really. Nail in the coffin. That was kind of the game. Casper De Noor made it 3-0 in the 42nd. Selang then gave away another penalty. I think it might have been Silla that gave this one away. Surprised Gonzalez didn't want to take this one. Well, he probably did want to take this one, but Sofiane Kieni stepped up to make it 4-0 at half-time. Game was pretty much done. Leuven could have added a couple more in the second half, but Gallia made a couple of good saves, a couple of good blocks from Selang defenders before Nathan and Singi, with a really nice header in the 89th minute, wrapped this one up. 5-0 to Leuven. They get back to winning ways. I know Mark Beers was saying before the game, the fans are expecting us to win this one at home. We haven't played as well at home as we probably could have done. But yeah, that was pretty emphatic from them. 5 defeats in a row for Selang. They're rock bottom going into the break, and I think they're where we finally expected them to be. It's just taken us 17 games to get there.
Yeah, this was really awful stuff from Selang. I thought their basic decision making and their discipline was just not there at all. I mean, the interesting thing when you go and look back at the goals is I think a lot of them are preventable merely if people pick up their runners, just by sheer virtue of if you get a bit tighter on your man, you know what I mean, they're less likely to get a shot away and they probably don't score. You know, it's really kind of grim viewing, and as a coach you watch that and you probably think, right, well, where do I start with this? Because obviously actually, once probably the third one went in, I think they really did chuck it. You could see their body language. There was even less of an effort to close kind of space down. And I think it was just a hopeless performance, to be honest. There were some tiny pockets early on, actually, where they looked vaguely threatening. They got into some good positions, started to get behind Leuven a little bit, but really, really poor. And I think, they'll be looking forward to the break, and it gives them a chance to kind of go away and I suppose reset a little bit as much as possible. An important win for Leuven, actually, I think, especially to win so emphatically kind of going into the break. That probably sets them up kind of quite nicely for the second half of the season now. And of course, that was their second 5-0 win within the space of a few days, having had a really emphatic cup win just before that as well. So they'll be feeling a little bit better about themselves, particularly in light of the fact that over the last couple of weeks we've been a little bit more critical of them than we have for some time. But it's very difficult to say anything positive about Serang at the moment.
Yeah, I guess I won't be touching much on Serang. Just the Sissoko nightmare, of course, as well. Own goal and red card, and then the whole of Serang went down with him as well. I guess that sums it up. For Leuven, it was also, they needed a victory in the league, of course. They picked up some confidence, I guess, in the cup game. It was their first win since the 8th of October. So 6 league games. They really needed to pick up that win, and now they're sitting in 8th, which is probably a good resemblance of where they want to be. Interesting that both penalties were not taken by the same player as well, even though Gonzalez was still on the pitch. An interesting penalty system. We all know Union also had one last season, and I'm also surprised to see Guillen take another penalty after the one I've seen him take against Genk before, so that as well. But good for him that he got that out of his system now, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. Guillen's one of those players that's he's very confident in himself. Do you know what I mean? He's got a lot of self-confidence, and he's got kind of, it's not arrogance, but that confidence to be like, I'm taking this penalty, even though, like you said, like Mario Gonzalez was literally on the pitch and he's been an absolute deadeye from the spot most of the season. So that was interesting.
Also, since he's indeed in contention for top scorer as well at the moment, so that's another part of that that's a bit surprising, but it does not matter, of course, as long as they score regularly from the spot.
Yeah, exactly. And to be fair, the way the game was going, like Gonzalez probably thought, I'm going to have a couple more chances here. But he didn't add to it. Let's move on to the next hammering, because it was we had 11 goals in 2 games, and unfortunately 2 sides just got absolutely battered. Scott and I mentioned last week after Oostend's win against Kortrijk that Valhammer came out and was like, there's still work to do, and he was definitely proven right by his side. They showed that they do have that kind of softness and kind of willingness to roll over for a second time this season under different managers, which suggests there's clearly an issue there. They managed more shots than Selang, to be fair to them, in their pummeling, but they didn't get any on target. Only 7 shots, none on target. Westerlo were 16 shots, 8 of those on target. 6 of those went in. 15 minutes in, just kind of innocuous midfield. I think it was Ambrose or someone loses the ball, and it shouldn't have been as dangerous as it was, him losing the ball where he did in the halfway line. Like, they should have been able to not concede from there, but the ball just kind of flies in between all the defenders. Douglas Nene's running onto it. Really, really cool, calm finish from him. It then goes to 2-0 quite quickly after that, about 10 minutes later. Tua Dix coming in off the right-hand side to make it 2. Chadley then steps up to convert a penalty that Oostend had given away. And then it's a bit of Lyle Foster show in the second half, 49 minutes in, really calm, collected finish from him to make it 4-0, I think, at this point. He does it again about 4 minutes later to make it 5. They had loads of other chances as well. Phillips actually made a couple of decent saves, but then Halil Akbunar, with a deflected shot on the edge of the box, makes it 6-0 to Westerlo. Once again, Maxime de Kuiper was great. 2 assists from him. I thought Brian Reynolds was great as well. I think he got an assist in there. They do love kind of creating from the fullbacks. We've spoken about this before. But yeah, I think it was kind of sums up quite adequately where both sides are at the moment. Oostend really inconsistent. That's loss, win, loss, win, loss. Whereas Westerlo kind of like, okay, yeah, they've had a really good start to this season. If you'd probably offered them playoff 2 by the time of the World Cup break, they'd have definitely taken it, wouldn't they?
Oh yeah, undoubtedly they would have bitten your hand off for it. And Westerlo are actually kind of continuing that general trend of the side that's come up the previous year generally doing pretty respectably. I think from an Ostend perspective, I suppose the question is, will the real Ostend please stand up? I mean, I think all sides obviously have it within them to take an absolute battering in maybe one game a season and have a result like this. But as Ben was saying there, this is the second time this season that they've conceded 6 in a game, and that's rather worrying. It's kind of bizarre because last week I was saying lots of nice things about them and talking about how they were doing all of the basics really, really well, and how that was probably their best performance arguably since Alexander Blessing was still there. And then they follow up this week with this, which was just a bit surreal for me to watch. They were absolutely awful, really, really awful. I mean, all of those things that you expect of them and that we saw the previous week, the aggression in the press, the intensity, the willingness to win balls in the transition and win the ball back quickly in the final third, none of that was there. In fact, there was no willingness to win the ball back actually anywhere. They really just didn't kind of turn up. I expected them to be a little bit better in the second half, obviously, but actually we got exactly the same thing again. So I do not really know what's going on, and I think Dominic Talhammer probably will be scratching his head now and wondering kind of what it is that he needs to do, because they'd set a standard to a certain extent last week, a level of performance that I think is probably what they're aiming for most weeks. And it's just very strange to come in the following week and completely wind the clock back like that. And it was just absolutely dismal stuff. And I suppose it suggests that, as Ben was hinting at, there is perhaps a more deep rooted problem going on there that needs addressing, and we'll see what they decide to do about that, because I think there's going to be a lot of busy sporting directors over the next few weeks.
Yeah, what's up with Westerlo again? They keep getting these high scores, 5-4, 6-1. Now 6-0, finally one that's in their favor, ends up in their favor as well. Also a bit of a reminisce to 25 years ago almost. I think I talked about this in one of the first episodes of the season as well, when they beat Anderlecht 6-0 as well. That they have this kind of thing in them somehow. Also, the first home win versus Ostende in 5 games, in the last 5 games against them. So home games against them. So that's was a trend that needed to be broken, and they did so emphatically. Yeah, and Ostende, well, much the same story as Serrain in this game. Actually, 0 shots on target, so that's even one worse or better, how you want to look at it, than Serrain there, and just giving away all the goals. Not that much to add to what you guys said again. When the games are this one-sided, I guess it's difficult to add a lot of new things to whatever you're saying.
Yeah, there's not much debate to be had. They have scored as many goals as Club Brugge now, Westerlo with 34, but they also conceded quite a few with 30, so that's probably another frustration for Ostend, is that it's not that they came up against a steely defence in Westerlo. They just laid an egg there. Let's go to undoubtedly the game of the weekend. Zulteval again against Eupen. Where to start on this one? Eupen take the lead. Stef Peters just it's a long pass, but let's say he lumps the ball on the counter attack. Conan Ndri, great strength running onto it. He scores. Every one of us who said Conan Ndri should start is vindicated once again. Really good finish from him. Then 2-0 to Eupen. Reagan Charles Cook cutting in from the left-hand side and curling it into the bottom corner. And at that point, I'm sat there watching it and being like, this game's going to have goals, because there's no way Eupen are holding on to a 2-0 lead. You know that Zulteval are going to score and come back into it at some point, and then whatever happens is going to happen. And that's kind of the story of this game. Like, no matter what the scoreline was, you always felt the other team was still in it. Zulteval get back into the game. 39th minute, Matadismus on the left-hand side dinks a ball over. Zeno Gano, just he's the only one really wanting the ball, heads it into the bottom corner, I think it was, that makes it 2-1 to Eupen at that point. And then literally 2 minutes later, Eupen are going 3-1 up. Conan Ndri with a Could have been a cross, could have been a shot, probably a little bit of both. Either way, it finds Isaac Nuhu, who taps it in 3-1 at that point to Erpen. And at that point, you're thinking, if you're an Erpen fan, like, let's just hold out until half time and then we'll be fine here. We're 3-1 up, like, let's hold out. But no, they go and give away a penalty. Initially, it was given as a free kick on the edge of the box, but when I initially saw it, I thought that looks like a penalty. And then even on the replays, I was like, it looks like a penalty. Took a little bit of time, but they did make the decision that it was a penalty. Zinagano once again stepped up to dispatch that. He finishes this game with 2 goals and 2 assists. So great performance from him and kind of reiterates his importance to the team. So going into half-time, it's 3-2 to Erpen. So I'm getting all mixed up already. 56 minutes in, Boris Lambert heads in a Steph Peters corner to make it 4-2 to Erpen. And yeah, at that point, Mbaile is just chucking everything at this game. Lennart Hallett comes on as well, kind of rare appearance for him. A Forzon, Stan Brame comes on, like he's just chucking all the strikers at it. And Stan Brame gets his second of the season for Zulte Waregem in the 83rd minute. So you got timestamp these. 83 minutes, Stan Brame makes it 4-3 to Erpen. Literally a minute later, Chinonso Afor makes it 4-4. And it's just chaos at this point. Absolute chaos. And then 4 minutes later, Ali Federa completes this ridiculous 5-minute turnaround, making it 5-4 to the hosts. Celebrate. Everyone's going wild. The celebrations are absolutely mad. Everyone thinks they've done it. You know what I mean? They think, right, we're going to hold out. We've come back. We've broken the Pandas. We're going to win this game. Until the 94th minute. And Louis Boston, who's actually been pretty decent for them since coming back in, he just makes an absolute howler, letting the ball slip through his hands from a low cross from the right-hand side. Sambu Sumano taps it in the 94th minute. It finishes 5 goals apiece, and it's just one of those games where I didn't want to watch any football after this because I was like, nothing today that I see is going to be anywhere near as good as this game. And even when it was 4-2 to Erpen and there was 10 minutes left, I was like, something can still happen in this game. Like, these two sides are so chaotic. They have no control over anything. What is going to happen? And even when, Federa scored, you're like, well, it's definitely not over, is it? It's 5-4, but anything can happen. And that is literally what this game was about. It was a ridiculously good game to watch. Probably horrendous to watch if you supported either side. And it's just one of those classic games, isn't it, where both sides will come away disappointed that they didn't win it because both sides at some point in the game should have won it.
Yeah, this is, I think, probably what they call a neutral's dream, from the entertainment point of view. I think it kind of sums up in a way Zulta's season for me, insofar as, they're able to turn the game round. You think they've won it, although you do have a bit of doubt in the back of your mind, like Ben was saying, and then they kind of throw it away. Eupen are thinking exactly the same thing from their perspective. Just absolutely crazy. I didn't see this one live, as Ben has been joking about a lot on our socials and in our group chat. I was watching a game that was a lot less exciting on all fronts than this one. So a lot of my entertainment this weekend came from the fact that I was watching that other game while getting updates from this one and realising that I was missing something kind of quite special, but I've been able to kind of go back and have a look at it. It's been interesting to hear Mbaile over the last couple of days talking about this game as well and reflecting on it. The coach's reflections on this game, the debrief are almost as wild as the game itself. I think, he was interestingly talking about having quite a young defence and wanting to emphasise that they are going to make mistakes and that he wants to kind of persevere with them and give them the confidence of knowing that it's okay to make mistakes and, you won't be punished for it. You're not going to be dropped and all of those sorts of things. Although he did acknowledge that the nature of some of the mistakes was such that, you're not leaving yourself any chance of really getting anything out of a game or doing anything positive, with the types of mistakes that are being made as well. He did comment as well on the fact that they've tended to start games very, very poorly this season. It's not until often the second half where they get going in games, and that's quite interesting in itself because it's a worrying trend really, because often you can be out of games before you even get to that stage. So it's never a position you want to be in as a coach, knowing that you have to address issues at half time, and it obviously suggests something, not positive anyway in that team dynamic that allows them to kind of go out in that way. The fact that they can perform when they do get themselves into games suggests that, obviously that potential that they're hoping they can convert into something consistent is there, but it's how you peel back the layers to expose that. But an absolutely wild game, and one that's probably worth a rewatch.
Another game you talked about a lot already. I personally feel like Eupen definitely will feel they should have won this after giving away a 2-goal lead, not once, not twice, but 3 times. And in the end, they even still could have won it even after Zulte Waregem equalized. On the other hand, Fadera will also feel really bad after having been influential at a good side for Zulte Waregem, but then being very naive in staying down in the last minutes after that comeback. Of course, Eupen is not going to pass the ball out at that moment of time, in the face of the game, in how the flow of the game was going. Boston also makes a mess out of that. So that's of course the immediate cause for that late equalizer. But a few things there to be said for a few players there. Both teams reached an XG of more than 3. Not a surprise if the game ends at 5-5, of course, but they both deserved a lot of those goals as well. And definitely topsy-turvy game, and very exciting. Envious of a friend of mine that was actually there by accident, I guess, because he's not a fan of one of both teams, either sides, but more as a neutral. That he picked that game out, and we saw a lot of goals in that way. Very important late equalizer, of course, for Eupen, keeping them out of the relegation zone and keeping Zulte Waregem below them as well. More importantly, even should give them a bit of more peace and rest for the rest of the season. Although after such a game, I think you also need this kind of rest. They will be in the end happy that they got a point out of it, but should probably be very disappointed that they did not get all 3.
Yeah, it's one of those kind of almost relegation 6-pointers that at the end of the season could come back to haunt them if they kind of look back and think, we should have won that one, really extended our kind of gap to that bottom 3. Also, kind of interesting kind of side note, World Cup note, Nuruddin obviously is going to the World Cup with Ghana, called up despite not really playing much for Eupen this year with Leonard Moser taking over. But then I think both first choice and backup keeper for Ghana, so Joe Woolacott and Richard Afoy, I think they're both injured. So Nuruddin, despite playing like barely any time at Eupen, could actually play some World Cup minutes. And if he performs well, I do wonder after a game like that whether they'll be like, maybe we'll switch back to Nuruddin over Merza, because I don't know, it definitely wasn't a game for goalkeepers apart from picking the ball out of your own net. Scott, as you watched the Dross game, I'll give you the honour of telling us what actually happened in this, because obviously I didn't see it, and I literally had no interest in watching anything else after that because I was just kind of absolutely fried. So why don't you talk us through what in the end was actually a really important win for Cercle in the grand scheme of like the classification.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. I mean, this game is much like Cercle's game last week against Leuven, where there wasn't a great deal between the sides. This game was kind of exactly the same. I had a feeling kind of watching it that it almost had a 0-0 written all over it, and that it was going to be a classic tale of kind of two sides kind of cancelling each other out. Cercle did pretty much what they did last week against Leuven and kind of kept going and kind of got their just rewards in the end. Ouida with another goal just before he goes off to the World Cup. I think he now has 7 and 17 for Cercle, so he's coming into the sort of form that they signed him for. As we know, having spoken to Carlos Avina regularly, there were some issues which they've now got to the bottom of surrounding kind of Ouida's sort of health and performance issues that have now been addressed, and he now seems comfortable and is really doing the business. Interesting. I mean, I think St Truiden arguably slightly the better of the two, but as is often the case, kind of struggling to convert. There was some interesting stuff going on in this game tactically, particularly early in the second half, because Hollerbach took off Gianni Bruno very early in the second half and put on Christian Bruhls, and that was kind of an odd one, particularly in light of how good Gianni Bruno's been recently. I thought I didn't really understand that decision at all, particularly when the game was still 0-0 at that point. So it was a strange one. Cercle will be particularly delighted with this. I mean, they go away now to a winter training camp. They're away for 7 to 10 days with Monaco, so the hard work doesn't stop from their perspective. And one rather nice thing before the kickoff in this game was St Truden did quite a nice little presentation to Daniel Smith, the St Truden goalkeeper, and Cercle's Ayazi Ueda, to recognise the two players about to go off and join the Japanese squad. But Miran Muslic will be looking at this result and last week's narrow win against Leuven at home at the Ambridal and feeling kind of good about himself and the club at the moment, because they're now able to turn very small margins into victories at a time of the season which is, first of all, very important. But I think 6 wins in 8, something like that now for Miran Muslic, and Carlos Avina's decision to kind of change coach has been really completely vindicated at the moment, you would say, and they're really doing some kind of quite special things again, and they're definitely going to be, I think, one of the sides watch going into the second half of the season, because there's some really interesting things going on there, particularly if they can maintain picking up points in games like this, which normally they wouldn't have done before. So a game that didn't have a lot to write home about it, I think might have maybe longer term significance for one of these sides in particular.
Well, for both of them, I guess, because they leapfrog Sint-Truiden with this win as well, so that's quite important in the whole story. Then 1 shot on target for both teams, so that actually sums it up in a bit of the opposite of the previous game we discussed, Sint-Truiden and Eupen. And Sint-Truiden still a bit worrying, especially with that Bruno. Not that I'm a huge fan of Bruno, but I guess for in recent weeks he has been firing. But they still have the 3rd lowest amount of goals scored, with 3 teams going down. That would be worrying if their defense would not be as good as it usually is. Although it did not help them in this particular game. 19 points out of a possible 24 for Miran Muslic now. So a really good start of his Cercle Brugge coaching career. Ueda scored his 7th of the season as well, and that's coming back to that moment before the game. Ueda facing his national team goalkeeper.
Yeah, he really is finding some form, Ueda, and it's like, it'll be interesting to see how he goes at the World Cup. Hopefully he'll be able to carry a little bit of that form over into that. But then I guess if you're a Cercle Bruges fan, you're probably also like, we don't want too many people noticing what he's doing because we don't want him to be leaving us too soon. Kind of a catch-22 there. Interestingly, just kind of looking at kind of the wider picture. We've spoken about St Truden, obviously a very good defensive team, one of the better defensives in the league, but attacking wise now, they're going to finish this kind of first round of fixtures 17 goals in 17 games. It's just a bit, especially when you consider the only 2 teams that scored less than them are Selang, who only scored 1 less than them, and it's Selang. And then Kortrijk have obviously struggled massively. They've only scored 14 goals, which is just horrific. And we will talk about Kortrijk, no doubt. But that's like when you said there, Scott, about Bruno coming off and Bulls coming on, like I look at kind of the lineup they're going with and stuff like that, and where can they probably shift things around a bit to be a little bit more attacking, but they're kind of sticking at the moment like Boya Kanate together, like that's quite a defensive midfield. As much as we've joked about Boya getting up and down the pitch sometimes, Janssen's kind of been playing centre back. Now he's playing right midfield. It's like kind of he's still probably got that. He's still more of a defensive mindset. So when you take someone like Bruno off to bring on Brules, you're not going more attacking. You're just kind of one attacker for the other. Whereas could you have taken off a Boya and gone like that? And because obviously he's playing Okazaki in behind Bruno and Hayashi. I don't know if that's Okazaki's game. I don't think he's that creative. I've never felt with him. I've felt with him as more of like he works very hard and he'll try and finish and do that sort of stuff. I've never thought of him as like a player that's going to knock anything, like someone they had in Kagawa, who's obviously injured, and Brules is more of that sort of a player. So I think at some point Holleback's going to have to ease off the strong defence a little bit to push a little bit more in the opposite direction. But I know that's quite a difficult thing to do, because if it doesn't pay off, they could then plummet a little bit quicker than they've built this solid foundation. But that's kind of, I do have a little bit of a concern for them especially in the goal scoring front, especially with Bruno coming off the pitch, it's kind of like, well, yes, Hayashi can score, Okazaki can score, but I feel like Bruno maybe will bag a couple more kind of tap-in goals that the other two won't. But yeah, that's just my concern. I'll be interested to see if they do anything in January, because I think there's definitely obviously scope to do something potentially there to bring in maybe some more creative players, particularly maybe on the right-hand side if he's not sold on Hashioka at the moment, which it seems like he isn't. It seems like Hashioka's kind of out of favour there. So is there a more creative right-hand player? Because I think Bocat, we've said he's started to get some assists. He is kind of a little bit more creative on the left-hand side. So plenty to think about, I guess, for Binky's men over the winter break. Let's go to Charleroi and talk about, I can't remember how long this game lasted, but it obviously didn't finish. It finished at the time 1-0 to Charleroi. I think it's Bembawali again with another goal, which is good. He's getting into a habit of scoring goals for them, which is quite important. Adam Zorgan with the assist for that as well. It was a really nice finish actually from Bembawali. However, despite being 1-0 up, Charleroi fans brought a halt to this one with their protests. The game didn't finish, and I think it kind of shows the frustration of the fans there, that even when they're winning this game and could get the 3 points because they were playing quite well, they were creating quite a few chances, there's still so much frustration and anger there that they're willing to kind of put the game at a halt and kind of cost their own team. But it's also kind of like we're seeing so much of this at the moment, and it's really, really frustrating for fans, especially fans who are supporting their clubs and going to these games. And yet they may not be happy with what's going on, but they're now being denied the chance to watch some football probably with this way this is going. And like we've seen so many games kind of like partially suspended for a few minutes while like smoke has to clear. And I don't know, it's getting a little bit kind of tiresome, and it kind of feels like there's a lot of copycat kind of behaviour going on between different fan groups.
I think one of the bizarre things for me about this was the fact that there should have been a slight degree of positivity around this game. You know, it'd only been a matter of a few hours before that it had been confirmed that Felix Mazu was returning to the club as T1 for a second spell. And obviously, with them being 1-0 up, you would think, okay, right, well, we need the points. They've been unquestionably one of the biggest underperformers of the season so far, based on what they have produced. So players are not performing at all. But it's just bizarre to see fans of a side deliberately sabotage a game when your side are on the way to gathering the 3 points. And the way this season's gone for Charleroi, these 3 points that they're now going to lose effectively, because this game will be forfeited almost certainly now. Those 3 points that they would have got could be very, very valuable to them in the end. I think the fans at Charleroi, as Ben was saying, have been discontent for quite a while, though. I think this goes a little bit beyond just a sort of disappointing season as well. I think there's a number of factors at that club that at the moment that are making fans kind of unhappy with the general situation. But yeah, I mean, to be in a position where you're winning the game and to willfully throw that away is really strange, and plays into the bigger narrative, which we've obviously seen other instances this weekend as well. As Ben was saying, Anderlecht fans letting off flares during a game. And obviously there was a Pro League meeting today as well. The CEO of the Pro League, Laurent Paris, was meeting with representatives of all the clubs today to discuss plans for measures that they're bringing in and how they can be tougher more quickly as well. And I think a lot of people are now just hoping that we get the detail on that, because it's something we've all been aware of for a while, but we need to see the detail to see whether it's workable. Interesting to see clubs now being a little bit more proactive, certainly in a verbal sense, kind of coming out and condemning behaviour that they wouldn't before. And some other commentators suggesting that perhaps the long-term solution to this particular issue is more cameras in grounds, which, while on the one hand might seem like an interesting and obvious solution, I think it's not good for the majority of fans who can behave themselves to find themselves on the wrong end of kind of a police state mentality, because a small number of people are able to sabotage a game. But that's probably a discussion for another time.
Yeah, definitely. There's a few issues with all the cameras and privacy and so on, which we it could open a whole can of worms. There is no easy solution. Nice Algerian connection for the goal. That's all I want to add for this game. Can't do anything else than condemn the behavior. At the same time, regulate the use of pyro. Maybe like it's more used in the Nordic countries as well. It will be tough to find a good balance there. There should really be more of a dialogue. The momentum is not perfect there for a dialogue, because it seems too obvious to punish one certain kind of fans as well and put them in a corner. But at the same time, you have to in a way limit it. I'm happy that I do not have to take any decisions in this matter, because it would be really difficult. But I hope that the right people will do the right job there. Which is not necessarily being too repressive. That's also just one thing I want to add.
Yeah, do not envy them having to come up with a way of stopping all this happening without punishing every single fan of any group or any kind of, or every ultra, I guess you could say, because it's clearly not all the ultras that are acting like that. So, I mean, yeah, we'll see what happens there. Let's get back to the football. Let's go to the Jan Breidel on Sunday lunchtime. Club Brugge against Antwerp, two sides that are probably... they've not been in the best of form recently. Antwerp coming off the point that they gained last week. Club Brugge coming off the defeat that they had as well to Ghent. Kind of chances for both sides in the first half, quite a cagey affair. Brandon Mekkeler did get the opening goal from the Scott Olsen corner. That made it 1-0 to the host Club Brugge. They then went 2-0 up. Fernukler, or was it Noah Lang? I just don't know who scored this one. I've seen it written as Noah Lang, but then I've also seen it written down as Fernukler. I thought it was Ukler that scored the goal, but I mean, either one of those two, it could have been. It was Ukler who definitely had the shot. Maybe it nipped off Lang and went in. Ukler's been given an assist on football, but I'm like, that's not really an assist if you shoot, is it? Like, it hits someone and goes in. Let's be honest, that's just not an assist. Either way, at that point, it was 2-0 to Club Brugge, and they threw it away. We've spoken about them kind of just taking their foot off the gas and kind of letting games slip away from them this year. Obviously, we've seen that more against weaker sides in the league, whereas you'd expect a side with the kind of quality that Antwerp have. Yes, they aren't showing it at the moment, but the quality that they do have, you'd expect them to kind of get back into this game a little bit better than other sides. Mikkel Frey did get them back into it in the 75th minute. And then I don't think this is a penalty, if I'm honest. I think it's a really soft penalty. Yes, Mekkeler's hand does kind of go across the player, but it just doesn't look like there's enough force or anything to cause a foul. However, referee gave it. Janssen stepped up, made absolutely no mistake from the spot. And that's how this one finished. It finished 2-2. Club Brugge would obviously be disappointed, probably with the penalty, and there's that fact that they threw away a 2-0 lead, and means they kind of slipped further down. They now in 4th position, Antwerp in 3rd. Ghent are just behind them. We'll get to them in a bit, but they're kind of, that win against Club Brugge has really helped them in the sense of catching up a little bit. They're only 3 points behind Club Brugge at the moment. I feel like the breaks probably come at a good time for Club Brugge, I guess. Kind of, they've had a weird season in the sense of a really good European campaign and a really iffy domestic campaign so far, but obviously they're still in it. Like they're not counting them out at all. But Antwerp, they haven't won in 4 games, but this will feel a little bit better in the sense that they came back from 2-0 down against a playoff 1 caliber side and a potential title challenging side. And again, they're probably like, we needed this break so badly because we've not really had any form at all for the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, Antwerp will be absolutely delighted with this. I think they were probably the better side over the course of the game, and to salvage a point, you know, in the last 15 minutes with those 2 goals is pretty good going. I'm with you, Ben. I don't think that was a penalty in a million years, but you know, when you're behind in a game, you'll take all the gifts you can get, I suppose. Club looking just slightly out of sorts, you know, as Ben was describing, and yeah, they will be kind of, I suppose, grateful of the rest. Probably one of the few sides that actually, well, as you know, as Ben was saying there, their playoff 1 position is now looking just tiny bit precarious because of their defeat last week. And the fact that, you know, Ghent had a good win again this weekend, and Club have dropped more points. You know, that 3-point difference conference all of a sudden is looking really, really interesting. Antwerp, obviously, this allows them to keep their noses just ahead of Bruges as well, so they will be well the happier of the two sides, definitely.
Mechelen scoring in his 350th club game was a bit fitting, I guess, as well. But again, a lead thrown away, and now still in not still in fourth position now, Union Club Brugge. So that they will not be happy with that after this half of the season. Of course, everything is still to play for, but they will not have expected to be in fourth position to drop that low for their standards in the table by this point already. Nice for Vermeer to get his first start in the league in such an important game for Antwerp. I thought he also was fouled on that Mechelen goal as well. But yeah, that's another discussion. Bounce back in 3 minutes from Antwerp with indeed a very soft penalty. I guess. But they will be relieved with that. Janssen getting a goal and another goal and assist. Something else that came out of Antwerp is that they're going to break soon with 9 goal on as well. I guess we can touch on that based on this game as well. A marriage that never really worked so well, I guess, to discuss it a bit here. And after 1.5 seasons, it seems to be over. Antwerp indeed will be happy to still be ahead of Club Brugge. 8 points out of the last 8 games is of course not enough for them, but this one will feel a bit like a victory given the way it all panned out. And Club Brugge, they still seem to be a bit shaky in defense as well.
Yeah, just touch on a couple of those other things you said, Joris. Obviously, yeah, the Nainggolan one's just like kind of, it's not really a surprise, especially when Gaysons came out and was like, yeah, I wouldn't do it again, and I definitely regret doing it. In terms of signing him. So I saw that and I was like, yeah, that's over then. Then away he goes from here. I doubt it's going to be in Belgium still. I don't know, unless Beerschot are like, do you want to come to us? Come and play for us again? Revisit the youthful days? But I just can't see many clubs having the financial capacity to pay for him, and the ones that do won't want to touch him. So yeah, who knows where he'll end up. On Club Brugge, a little question maybe for you guys. Do you think, let's say, like, obviously we hope this doesn't happen, but let's say club get bounced out of the Champions League by Benfica. They put up a fight, but they lose. They're out. Then they don't win the league. Do you think Hufkens will have done enough with the Champions League to still be the manager at the end of the season? Or do you think his performance in the Champions League has masked the domestic side of it so much that once the Champions League kind of is over in that sense, all the focus is going to be on the kind of indifferent domestic performances, and the scrutiny and the pressure on him is just going to completely ramp up?
I think it'd be very difficult for him to keep his role if they don't retain the title, kind of regardless of what happens in Europe, because that's the kind of standard bearer, obviously, the platform that everything's kind of founded on.
I would even go further, and I think that, for Club Brugge winning the title, the results in the Champions League might be not a good, actually not be a good thing, because I think he would be out already if not for those results, which also makes it more difficult to throw him out as well, of course. But again, given the standard, indeed, like I mentioned, they're only fourth now at the moment. Of course, well within range of at least second spot, and actually everything is still to play for. As we know, the playoffs are still coming, so they can't really decide anything yet. But a few of the excuses that are also for the league are also based on Europe. But then you also see Union that even played more games already in Europe, and has a bigger squad than last season, but in depth still is not as big, I guess, or quality wise in depth, not as big as Club Brugge's on paper at least, and they are now jumping ahead of them again. Criticism whether there's something in that excuse or not, whether that's valid or not, that's not even the point here. I'm not asking for a sacking, but I would not be surprised that he would already have been out if it weren't for the European results. And I'm thinking and that they are masking a lot of things as well. But it's still early days, all know anyway. So, but the league results of Club Brugge have not been at the level that they should be. Well, the results might still be okay. So I guess the points they're grabbing are not too far off what they should be, but on the other hand, the level that they are showing, even in games that they have won in the end, is just disappointing, really, actually.
Sometimes in these performances in these games, the players have definitely let them down in terms of throwing leads away and stuff like that. But then it's also like, haven't looked into it enough, and I'm sure there's probably some really interesting stuff to look at to be like, well, where's he not adapted to what's going on the pitch, maybe that could have led to something. And I'm sure the powers that be at Club Brugge that's what they'll look at in the kind of grand scale of things. It's like, right, well, this and that. But yeah, no, I agree. I think, yeah, it's definitely masked some stuff, but they could still go on that run. He could still win the league. Like, I'm not saying they're not going to win the league by any stretch of the imagination at this point. You mentioned Union. Let's go to them next. I genuinely thought they wouldn't win this one just because Standard love playing against better teams at home, but shows how good Union are doing so far this season. Dante Van Zier getting them off the mark in the 23rd minute. Lovely volley, kept it low across, of course, Bodart in goal there to give them a 1-0 lead. However, they did then give away a penalty, upstepped penalty extraordinaire, Noah Descent again. He dispatched it in the 53rd to make it 1-1. Both sides pushing, both sides going for it. But another centre-back in the more traditional fashion, I must say, Christian Burgess, from a set piece, flying in, heading it into the back of the net, giving it large to the Standard fans. What more would you expect from big Chris Burgess? He absolutely loves it. And then probably definitely my favourite goal of the game and one of my favourite goals of the weekend. Really nice kind of, I think it was a crossover from the right-hand side. I think it was deflected, headed back in. I think it was Dennis Eckhart heading it back across. Bart Newcoop running onto it. First time finish. In my mind, I was screaming, take a touch. You haven't got that in you. But he sure showed me he definitely has it in him. First time finish into the bottom corner. 3-1 to Union at that point, and you think, yeah, that's game. They're going to win this one. Standard to get back into it very, very late on, 96th minute. Philip Zinkernagel, one of the players sent off last week, he dispatches a penalty, which makes it 3-2. Looks a little bit better for Standard. But it's another win for Union. They keep on rolling. Last 5, it's win, draw, win, draw, win. So they might draw their next game if you're a betting person. They are 10 points behind Genk at the moment. 6 points ahead of Ghent in 5th. So they are nicely into playoff 1. Standard, on the other hand, that's a second defeat in a row for them. It's nicely bunched actually in playoff 2 at the moment. Underneath Ghent, Veslo in 26. All the way down to Circular in 9th on 25. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4 teams separated by just a point. But for Standard, they're kind of trending in the opposite direction to the likes of Circular Bruges. So it's between kind of them and Leuven at the moment to see who's going to kind of drop out first for Circular to take over the way they are going. But the Union train just keeps on rolling, doesn't it, guys? And I think it's quite safe to say that the top 2 at the end of this kind of first part of the 17-match season are definitely the 2 best teams in the league at the moment.
Yeah, I think that's the big takeaway from this whole weekend. Actually, those top 2. And I was going to say that the thing I love about Union is there are just so many offensive threats in that side, whether it's strikers, wide men, or in the midfield. You know, there's goals in that side, and actually, it was probably one of their more average performances, if you like, but they were still able to win pretty convincingly in the end because of that creative firepower they have all over the place, and they're just such a good all-round side. You know, they're good at going forward, they're pretty good at defending as well, and they're able to win convincingly even in games like this, where I think it was a bit of a concern going into this one. Karel Geerts did highlight a couple of days before the game that he really wanted to impose upon his team that, you know, the opening stages of a game at Slesen are particularly important if you're the away side, and they've been building some small kind of momentum at home. They've definitely been better at home so far this season, Standard, and I think that was a concern for them, which didn't come to bear any fruits in the end. And interestingly, when you look at it statistically, actually, Standard haven't won 3 consecutive home games for 3 years now, which is just a mental statistic if you think about it. Ronnie Dyla afterwards looked like a man who'd just been beaten by a side that he knew were really very good. And I suspect, you know, looking at his body language, I think he saw Union and thought, yeah, I mean, they're well ahead of us at the moment, and, you know, wished he was in Karel Guerrero's shoes.
Union are doing really well as well. They only got 1 point less than they had last season when they went into at this stage of the season when they were leading the pack. But that's also what I meant before. Club Brugge is not even doing worse than they were last season, so they're just doing okay, I guess, point wise. It all depends a bit on perspective. But Union, 9 games unbeaten, only like I said, only 1 point less than last season. 9 games unbeaten, 7 wins in that streak, and 2 draws. A Van Zer classic, so to say, for that first goal as well, and indeed a very nice third goal. Two losses for Standard now in a row, again at a bad moment, right when they could also be in the mix. Well, they still are, of course. They're not completely out of sight, but for probably the 4th spot in playoff 1, they just still need that bit of consistency, even though, a bit like Della said, it was not the worst game from Standard. Of course, there was a lot of intensity from both sides that showed, and in the end, it was Union that did take the win with some efficiency, which is always a very important factor in football, as we always touch on as well.
All about the efficiency. Joris, you haven't been able to speak about Genk for a couple of weeks, so let's move on to them. Another win. They just keep on rolling. They travelled to Anderlecht, which, obviously, one of the questions about underachieving teams, and these guys are obviously one of the biggest underachieving teams. Annoyingly, it's kind of one of those games that El Canous, who's recently got called up to the Morocco squad, was had such a good game, played some really important passes, but didn't get the assist that he probably did deserve. But it was kind of his initial pass that found Daniel Munoz on the right hand side. His cross across was tapped in by Paul Onuachu. That came after Genk had a couple of other chances. Pencil had been quite wasteful with his just kind of decision making in the box, which is a little bit of a theme from him in this game. I thought he had a couple of opportunities where he should have shot or he should have crossed, and he didn't really do either. But Paul Onuachu gave them the lead in this one. Then Pencil did get his assist when he did do a cross. It coming in the second half, lovely pass from El Canous, just kind of, I think it was through the legs of, was it Delcroix? I think it might have been Delcroix, through his legs, Pencil running in, he squares it to the back post, Artiega's just there, of course, to tap it in. 2-0, Genk looking good, creating lots of chances, defending pretty well. And then Artiega gets himself sent off in the 74th minute for a bit of a silly foul on the halfway line, just inside the Genk half. However, once again, Genk showed that even with 10 men, they can keep a clean sheet. And it did have some decent chances in this one, but Van der Voort made some good saves to keep them at bay. Finished 2-0 to Genk. They keep rolling. 15 wins, 1 draw, 1 loss after 17 games. 45 goals in 17 games, by far top scorers in the league, and only conceding 15 makes them, I believe, the best defence in the league as well. So all the numbers are saying this is the best team in the league, and the table does not lie after 17 matches.
Touching on that, on this goal difference, goal scorers and also on the goal difference, the goal difference of Genk is as much as Antwerp's total goals scored as well, despite their good defense. But there's so many crazy stats to give about this as well. 24 points more than last season at this point for Genk. Only 5 points less than they had after 34 games last season as well. So that's already mad that they should really break that quite soon, hopefully. For me and other King fans, that barrier from last season. El Canous just line-breaking pass in the first half. It's also, of course, a defensive issue for Anderlecht there for several reasons. Ndiaye being completely out of position, but so the pass basically created the first goal, even though he will not be in any kind of statistics that are that you can see regularly, of course, in the underlying statistics. You can see that, but he had just such a great game actually. So can't say that enough. For the Belgian national team, a bit sad that he chose for Morocco, but this way he gets to the World Cup though. So a well-deserved selection for him there. A masterclass for him yesterday. I would even dare to say. It was so good to see. I never saw Genk so much in control. I think in a game against Anderlecht. Of course, this is one one of the weaker Anderlecht sides in recent history. I think everyone can see that, whether that's down to players or tactics and so on. But that they are not at the height of their confidence either. As anyway, yeah, that they were really just dictating the game. Yes, they gave away a few chances, but I never really had I only had the feeling that they should kill the game earlier. And indeed, Payne still made. He got an assist, but he still made quite a few wrong choices or in a lapse in technique as well at some point. But yeah, the tactics just seemed to be working. The system, it was so clear that they were looking for the space behind the defense, like they exploited at both goals actually. But also just complete game control, even when, of course, you still need to get lucky to not concede on one of the few occasions that Anderlecht broke through. So that's why, yeah, they should really have scored more, but without taking without going really into anything but first gear, they again managed to win this one. Even with being down to 10 men, they still were quite comfortable and even created a really great chance for Paintsel as well, where he did a good shot. So that's not one of his mistakes or anything, but that was saved. But there was a really nice sequence in midfield where they really outplayed Anderlecht, and that's probably the story of the whole game from Anderlecht's side. Yeah, there was just not enough intensity at all. I know they have not been at their best the whole season, but I was still a bit disappointed by their level, and they have some worrying signs. Of course, they're in 11th position now. Actually 12th, because either Mechelen, most likely Mechelen or Charleroi will jump over them with whatever result will be decided on that game. They have more losses than they have wins. Yeah, they have won once against the team in the entire top 10 in the whole first round, so that's not encouraging either when you need to jump into that. Also makes sure that they are not in that at the moment, so they definitely have a lot of things to work on as well. Comfortable win in the end, and very happy with everything that happened in this first half of the season. Whatever may still have come in the second half of the season, of course, there's nothing has been decided as I mentioned, but this they can't take from us anymore, and had a lot of joy in this first half of the season anyway. So long may that continue.
Yeah, I don't think I can add anything to that analysis at all, other than catch them if you can, because they're so far ahead of everybody at the moment. I think in lots of respects that the challenge is really up to the other sides now.
Yep. Absolutely. Could not disagree with any of that. Let's go to our final game, which was also the final game for Adnan Kustovic. He was sacked Monday, straight after this one that happened last night. This was obviously Kortrijk against Ghent. Started badly and went from bad to worse for the host in this one. Christophe Dahan with a pretty horrible tackle actually on Matisse Samwas. In the 20th minute, he was given a straight red card. Andrew Hulsager then gave Ghent the lead in the 33rd minute. Before Ibrahim Salah, he got his first goal for the club in the Pro League. Lovely, lovely finish. Just turned in, cut inside of Desiree, curled it past Illich into the top corner to make it 2-0. He's been looking really, really good actually these last couple of matches, when he's starting to come into his own. He did get a second, but that wasn't until after Sven Kums was sent off in kind of one of those evening it out sort of things that happen sometimes in games. He was sent off, but didn't really stop Ghent. Salah then tapped in at the back post to get his second of the season and his second of the night. This one was obviously an assist from Alessio Castro Montes. So I've also missed one because in between that, Laurent de Pocher came on and he got a goal to make it 3-0 at the point. So then Salah's made it 4-0 to Ghent. In a way, guys, I guess we all kind of knew Kustovic wasn't going to last. It was just obvious from the moment they hired him that this was not going to work. Like, it just didn't make any sense. And he had a small honeymoon period, I guess, to start off with. The win against Open, the win against Antwerp, but then you've had this Lam Kalzi situation where he's come out and said he's too big for the club and he's going to leave. Just kind of the fans are annoyed. Christophe Dahan crying after a game because of what someone said to him. Like, it's just a horrible situation at the moment, and the names that are coming out, they don't make me think that's the guy that's going to keep them up. Like Bernstork, his last two jobs at Genk, it wasn't great. Like, I just hated the rotation. At Erpen, I thought it was a harsh sacking, but since then they've looked a little bit better. But they must be in their honeymoon period. And then Bob Peters as well, because Bob Peters is linked to every single job that comes up at any point at the moment. It's just kind of, he's just there. Wait, I saw someone there was a picture of him like waiting by the phone. Someone had like screenshotted on, which I thought was quite funny. And then Yves van der Haag, of course, was also linked, the former Kortrijk manager. So 4 names there to kind of get your teeth into. For Ghent, on the other hand, it's been kind of a little bit reminiscent to last season where they just started really badly and now they're starting to pick up points. That's 4 undefeated, unbeaten in a row. Obviously, the win against Club Brugge is impressive. Then to follow up with this one is quite nice. They've closed the gap to playoff 1. They're well in with a shout of playoff 1 at the moment. That's despite the Tisu Dali injury as well. Starting to score some goals, which is nice to see. They're obviously keeping them out of the back, which we always knew was one of their strengths. But for Kortrijk, that means they finish this first part of the season second bottom. Just horrible kind of run of form that they've been on. All kind of started from that Zulte Waregem defeat in the derby and just all been kind of downhill from there. And I think something's got to happen, but I just don't know, out of the managers that have been listed, which one of those is going to be the right one to get a team that has some talented players in it to start playing like a talented team and push themselves up the pitch.
I think they're a club in chaos at the moment and seem to have been that way for a while. I know we've kind of alluded to that a few times over the last month. And in a way, what's happening now, I think, is what happens when the hierarchy of a club make a series of, pretty bad decisions. I mean, I think now you have to look at the decision to bring Belhacine back in at the start of the season. That probably wasn't a great call. Although understandable at the time. I think Kustovic was a very bizarre appointment. I think everybody had a feeling that, as Ben was saying, it probably wasn't the right appointment. That's been proved now. I mean, in charge for 12 games, won only 3. One of them was obviously a cup game as well, so it doesn't really count in terms of those numbers. And there was just a feeling watching him week on week that, he didn't really know what he was doing. He kind of looked lost. And that isn't always obviously down to the individual concern sometimes. I think that's now my impression of it is it's more a reflection of the kind of chaos inside the club and somebody who just feels absolutely, in a hopeless situation. I find it very interesting that his parting words actually after the game were that he knew that his time was probably up and that ultimately the future of the club was more important than his own future. Ghent, on the other hand, showed them absolutely no mercy whatsoever at all this weekend. I thought they were really very good. Salah is a definite star in the making. I think he could be very important to Ghent going forward now. And yeah, I think they just have to get this next appointment right. Whoever it is, they kind of have to if they're going to have any chance whatsoever, and they can't afford any more wrong turns.
I think we all predicted it indeed. Like Kustovic would not be their last manager this season. So unfortunately for that, Kortrijk just looking really dire. They're also the lowest scoring team still at the moment. 7 games winless. So I would even say, ironically, the win against Antwerp, which is their last win, is where the downfall started, which was also Antwerp's first loss back in the day. It already seems so long ago now. Yeah, and of course that's indeed in the league. They won the cup tie. Just looking pretty bad and not completely unexpected, I suppose, either. But they really need to get their next appointment right, as you guys touched on. Ghent, indeed, 3 points only out of top 4. How quickly things seem to change as well. 4 clean sheets in a row, which is also including the cup game in Europe, the last European game as well. But still, the defense seems to be a bit more looking like the defense that they were last season in the second half of the season. Let's see if they can continue that form in their next fixtures. I believe their first game after the break is also against Standard, which is a few points behind them only at the moment. It's good for them that they are back there, though. Under the radar, have turned the tides, it seems. But of course, we'll have to see if that continues in the next part of the season, as we have to say about every other team as well, of course.
Let's go quickly to a listener question then while we round out this 1A, because our other listener question is about a player in 1B, so a Challenger Pro League. So I think it's quite a fitting time to do this. This one's from Mike D. He asked us 2 questions. I think the first one we can kind of answer quite quickly because, it's just about the... he says, probably a dumb question, but I can't seem to find the answer anyway. Why do the managers wear armbands during games? You don't see that in other leagues. I think it's just to signify who the trainer is, the T1, the head coach is. I don't think it's anything more than that. I remember being a bit confused myself when I first saw it, but I think it is just kind of show who they are. I don't know why. Maybe high turnover of managers, and they're like, you don't know who's going to be in charge at any point. But I think that's probably the answer to that one. Second question, which is for all of us, and we could all have a quick kind of roundtable, quick stab at this. Which team is overperforming the most so far? Which team is underperforming the most so far? And which team is the most interesting heading into the back half of the season? Scott, you can go first on this one, then Joris, and then I'll take it at the end.
I think in terms of underperformance, I think one of the biggest underperformers is Charleroi. Anderlecht's an obvious one, but that it's kind of so obvious and been so long term there that it's almost kind of taken as a given. But yeah, Charleroi in terms of underperformance, I actually think that Antwerp are overperforming a little bit in terms of where they're at the moment, albeit they're probably not the biggest overperformers. And in terms of interesting sides to watch going into the second part of the season, I think Cercle are going to be one to keep an eye on.
Yeah, I'll also quickly come back to that first question. So indeed, the T1 is the only person that can be in the dugout zone, and that way they can see with the armband, they can see whether he is there. Actually, even all different functions in the dugout, trainer or the doctor or anyone else, they all have a different color of armband. So that's something to add to that part. Regarding the teams over and underperforming, well, obviously Genk is overperforming. It's quite an obvious one. They are really good, of course, at the moment, but yeah, they will not be able to contain such streak of only one loss, and that one even coming in the first game of the season already. And only one draw. That would be a miracle if that is sustainable. But Standard are probably overperforming. Definitely overperforming. I think that's the biggest overperformance at the moment, or in the sense overperforming in what we expected. So like coming back to our expectations before the season, that they are definitely a side that is really overperforming. I think you can still put Union there as well. I don't think they would have been many lists as second. Not that they would be very much lower, but that they really would be second and just really look this strong also in Europe. To bring that into the equation, yeah, that's really impressive. Of course, these are quite obvious shouts in the top half of the table. Underperforming, I would even say, that might sound a bit weird, but I think I touched on it already a bit as well, Club Brugge. Even though I even have to say that they come back to what I said earlier, like they even have the exact same amount of points they had after 17 games last season. So it's more because of the overperformance of other teams that they are only in 4th place at the moment. That I would also give them a shout, an unfortunate shout for that. I think the teams at the bottom are also obvious shouts, but I think most of them we expected them to be in that struggle, so I'm not sure if you really should look there. Anderlecht indeed. Westerlo also there's a shout for the overperforming, but again, I'm just weighing against our expectations, nothing with stats or anything else there. That are a few shouts. I think I already mentioned half of the league now. What we can expect from the rest of the season, who we can expect. I'm very curious to see how Standard will go on actually in Gent. All the teams around that top 4 positions, how they will fare.
Yeah, I don't have any teams left. Let me have a quick look. Yeah, I think for me, I felt harsh saying Union overperforming. Westerlo were going to be my shout for overperforming, and Leuven, obviously, comparatively, when they didn't have a striker, we didn't expect them to be anywhere near kind of playoff 2 area, but they're probably overperforming a little bit compared to my expectations. Underperforming at Anderlecht's obviously the main one there. I'm sticking Mechelen in there as well. I think they're underperforming, given that there still is some quality and there's some players, particularly important players in that side that are underperforming. But they're also kind of my team that I'm interested to see what happens in kind of the next half of the season, because I feel like they can go one of 2 ways at the moment. They're in that kind of weird position where, like, they had those 2 wins, it looked like it was good, but then a loss, a draw, and we don't know what's going to happen obviously with this Charleroi game, but they weren't that impressive in that one. So I'm kind of looking at them a little bit. I'm interested to see kind of which way they're going to go in that sense. And obviously, Cercle Bruges, I'm kind of interested to see how sustainable they can keep this kind of winning run on, and kind of how far they can push themselves. Kind of, can they become a solid playoff 2 team with that form that they're on? So yeah, they're definitely one of my teams that are interesting to watch. But I think there's just there's so many storylines and different things that can happen within this league that it's kind of always worth watching anyone. Same in the Challenger. I'll quickly run through the results and then we'll have a quick chat through all of this. And also the listener question around this, which kind of is relevant to this first game, which was Club Next against Anderlecht. That one finished 2 apiece. Standard's youth team, they drew 1-1 at home to Dender. Young Genk drew 0-0 with Denzer, which is a good result for Young Genk, actually. Beerschot beat Verton 3-0. Dante Rigo with an absolute screamer in that one. Following that, we had Elise against SK Bern. It was 1-0 to Leeds at half-time, and then Beveren just absolutely romped them in the second half to win that one 5-1. Molenbeek absolutely demolished Lommel at home to win 5-0 as well. Those two sides play each other next week at the top, and I think that's going to be an absolute cracker of a game to watch. They're both in really, really good form. Scott, as our Challenger Pro League connoisseur, do you want to kind of speak a little bit more about what happened and also talk a little bit about the listener question we got?
Yeah, well, in terms of the bigger picture, as always, Beveren stay top. They're just keeping their nose ahead of Molenbeek. Mbakani, on the subject of Beveren, actually, if you take into account the cup goals he scored over the past week, he's now got 6 and 6. So a player who we didn't really doubt still had it has got more than a little still to offer, and we know how important he's going to remain to Beveren, obviously with Daniel Moderna having a kind of longer term injury. Verton bottom, still struggling, and I think one of the big takeaways about the Challenger Pro League at the moment is, unlike the Pro League, there is no break for the World Cup, so the fixtures will continue through over the next month. And if you are a fan of a Pro League side, do get yourself along to a Challenger Pro League game during the course of that time, because there will be no break. So we'll probably have quite a lot to update you on by the time the next regular episode comes along. Anyway, we have, as Ben was saying, we've had a listener question about a Challenger Pro League player, actually, 23-year-old kind of Japanese winger Shion Homa at Club Next. The question was around, is Shion the real deal? What can we expect from him? Is the plan to progress to Club Brugge's senior side? I think the interesting thing with signings like this, for my tuppence worth, is clearly they see a lot of talent and potential in him. I mean, Club paid, I think, just over 1.2 million euros from, I think it was Albirex Niigata, J-League 2 side. In the summer, he's 13 appearances, 3 goals and 2 assists now. Scored a really lovely goal this weekend. Great technique. Clearly a player who does have potential. And this will go, I think, one of either two ways. Either he'll continue to progress, in which case he'll be lucky enough to maybe get some starts for the senior Club Bruges side. We'll need to wait and see. Alternatively, I'm sure there'll be other Pro League clubs willing to take him on if he does well, or for him to get a move elsewhere in Europe, because it's a great place for him to be playing regularly and to develop. So either way, whether it's with Club Bruges or whether it's elsewhere in Europe, I think he's doing the right things at the moment to continue progressing his career.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we've seen, obviously, with this kind of fluctuation between some players like playing for the second teams in the Challenger and then playing in 1A teams like on the same weekend, like the pathway is there, and Club Brugge have shown that they're happy to do that. Other sides have shown they're happy to do that. So I think the pathways, as long as he keeps impressing, I'm sure he'll be able to push into that. And if not, I'm sure St. Truden will buy him at some point. Like, they love a Japanese player. It just seems like a match made in heaven, done it. So I think, his goal was really, really good, actually. Like, just the way he was so quick at shifting inside, like, it was just such a nice kind of movement from the player. So yeah, he's definitely, like, from the kind of little bit I've seen of him from just kind of highlights and stuff, he looks like he's a good player. Technically looks quite decent and got the speed as well. So definitely one to keep an eye on. And yeah, we enjoyed that question. Joris, anything to add on this one?
On the question itself, not really. I think you guys already said a lot, but I just wanted to add a bit more on the 1B. Like, the first clean sheet for Young Genk as well. So that's it was time for that. Also indeed the Lierse-Beveren game, it must have been. I still have to watch the highlights or watch anything out of it, but it must have been weird and a real literal turning point there. Taveco getting the red card in the 50th minute with Lierse still leading 1-0 and then ending 1-5. Well, that looked quite influential there. They lost it completely there. Or Beveren really picked up their form there. I actually want to see the highlights or maybe even the full game here if I can actually get that somewhere. We'll see about that.
Yeah, there were some good goals in this one. If you haven't seen the highlights, definitely do check them out of this one. Tieno Barry's header I really liked as a goal, and then Sander Koopman with a really, really nice chip over the Leeds goalkeeper to make it 4-1, I think, at that point. Obviously, Lucas Ribeiro Costa was kind of involved in nearly all the goals. I think he had a really good game. Obviously, that's going off at the same time as the World Cup. We've spoken for quite a bit already, so I don't want to keep us for too much longer, but obviously we'll touch a little bit on that. Belgium up against Canada, you've got a couple of Pro League players. Morocco, you've got a couple of Pro League players. Croatia, who haven't picked any in this kind of for their game. I don't even know who would have been a potential for that kind of spot, but anyway, yeah, that's Group F. What would be a good tournament, I guess, with expectations kind of we're not good enough anymore to win it, probably because we're kind of certain players are kind of past it, certain players are out of form. Lukaku's injured and some of the stuff like that. But what would you kind of be happy with as a performance from the side this winter? Sorry, not summer.
Well, we know that historically the Red Devils tend to do better at major tournaments when not very much is expected of them. So I'm holding on to this historical fact in the hope that, maybe they're going to surprise us. I think, honestly, I think probably a quarter-final performance would be pretty respectable in light of lots of things. I expect them to win the group. Croatia will have other ideas, as they should, of course, but they're interestingly in a very similar position in that they're relying on a lot of very experienced old guard players, much like Belgium are, to kind of do the business for them. Of course, when you look at the way the group fixtures pan out, Belgium don't play Croatia until their third and final group game, so we're going to have a very good idea of how the group's going to pan out by that stage as well, which takes the sheen off the big game in the group just a little bit, I think. But it's worth bearing in mind, defensive question marks, despite the inclusion, the rightful inclusion of Zeno de Bast. No team has ever won a major tournament with a defence with the average age of this one as well. So that doesn't bode particularly well. And also they are in the more difficult side of the draw, which can work in your favour sometimes. But if they're going to do anything, they're going to have to do it the hard way. I think the squad, to be honest, is as strong as it could be. I was quite happy with it. I wasn't, flinging my toys out of the pram. I could kind of understand the whole selection, and on paper it is a strong squad, but it's fitness issues, and are players going to be at the top of their game to do anything? Because in knockout football at this level, this is really where you get exposed if you don't have the goods. So I wish them well, and I am looking forward to it because I think you have to. And it's rather funny, Ben was getting confused between the summer and autumn there because they've completely turned this on its head. Let's not do that again, though, guys?
Yeah, what a mess. I think I'm going to be in South Africa for the first 2 weeks of the tournament, so it's actually going to be summer for me, so it's going to feel even more bizarre like what is going on. Unfortunately Bafana are not in it, so I won't get to see them, but I just haven't really looked into it enough, I don't think, to kind of know what the permutations are of who you can face who and who can do what. Obviously I want England to win it. I'm not going to be I want Belgium to win it. Obviously I'd like England to win it, and I don't even know if Belgium would be my second choice to win it. No offence, I'd quite like a random outsider, maybe an African side, and then Belgium. That's kind of my preference. England, an African side, of Belgium, or even like an Asian side, like a Japan or something. I don't know. I think it's whoever can stay fit is going to win this tournament, because the way the build up into it, the amount of injuries to some really key players is making it a little bit boring, to be honest. In that sense, it could be quite dull if the likes of like Sadio Mane can't play. Lukaku, obviously, as we mentioned, can't play or doesn't play a lot, or kind of another player gets injured between now and then. I don't know. But we shall see. Obviously, like I said, we're not going to be doing that much. We're not going to be doing any podcasting during the tournament. It's just, logistically impossible. We don't have the time or the capacity to do that, unfortunately. But that is the end of this episode and the first half of the Pro League season that's in the books. Scott and Joris, fantastic to have all of us back together again. And as always, it's been a pleasure sharing this time with you.
Yeah, it's been great to have a nice bumper episode before the World Cup break, and do try and get to a Challenger Pro League game if you can. Like I say, they're not having a break, and best of luck to Red Devils. I'm looking forward to seeing what you can do, and we'll see you in a little over a month.
Yes, I'll definitely try to catch some Challenger Pro League games in this period.
Absolutely. As always, thank you very much for listening. We'd love a review from your podcast app of choice. If you want to get in touch with us during the World Cup and ask some questions, feel free. We'll still be talking about the Pro League in that area and still covering it from that. And kind of, if you've got questions leading into kind of the next half of the season, do get in touch in the usual places. But as always, thank you once again for listening, and we'll speak to you in about a month's time on another episode of the Belgian Football Podcast.